Beautiful. Awe-inspiring. Contemplative. In a time where big games are looked up to for pushing technical boundaries, where gameplay has largely been reduced to different flavors of the same milkshake, it's in smaller endeavors like that of Limbo and Journey that we see the medium of gaming transcend its preconceived boundaries. They are experiences free of a hard skill barrier, open to all willing to give them a chance. Rather than telling a story through words, they share them by way of visuals, music, and sound design. They're arguably the pinnacle of the show don't tell philosophy in action, and focus on delivering a universal experience that can be understood on a personal level by anyone who engages with them. Such was the target the newly formed Nomada studio aimed at, and the result is a genuine thing of beauty. In its pastel watercolor aesthetic, in its surreal unified world design, its score majestic and subdued in equal parts, and the underlying themes beneath it all. This beauty begins in a void of black and white, which gradually unfurls in a myriad of colors and backgrounds, filled with visuals and sounds that send light tingles down your spine. The world is a singular creation, uninterrupted by loading screens but punctuated by short cutscenes. The levels weave over, on top of, and around each other, and yet you traverse through them seamlessly, as though at every moment a part of you knows exactly what to do. It's intrinsically intuitive by way of integrating visual cues into its levels via colors and simple shapes, and shows masterful level design, directing the player using the bare minimum. As I progressed, more colors were gradually added, changing not just the color palette, but simultaneously opening, closing, and modifying all paths around. It can be likened to the protagonist's state of mind changing with time. Areas I'd been to were nigh unrecognizable as I passed them by a second time. The world was filled with small puzzles that branched out from various central points, solved with various mechanics that are gradually uncovered. The soundtrack comprises a set of tunes that all stem from a few simple bass melodies. What starts off with simple reverberating notes grows accordingly to fit the visual and emotional themes of each area. One of the strongest punches that threw my way was right at the start, by way of the desert theme, where the soft melody is gradually contrasted with an arpeggio on a pipe organ, or the juxtaposition between the tracks played as you stand your ground against one particular bird, as opposed to when you ascend alongside it. Each of these tracks is accompanied by a bevy of ambient sounds that ring out against them. The rustle of the wind, the crunch of ice under your feet, the clinking as you climb constellations. They all supplement the music to build a soundscape that grows more and more dazzling the more attention you pay to it. The amount of detail in this game is evident in every aspect, including its gameplay. Not a single part of this game is without purpose, and while this meant some puzzles would occasionally trip me up, all it would take was a quick glimpse at the bigger picture to grasp what I should have been doing. Rushing through is foolhardy. Staying calm and mindful had me enter a state of flow, where everything just clicked as soon as I saw it. And not once did it come across as patronizing. It's a distinct but challenging approach to inclusivity, rather than make the game straightforward to the point where it takes little mental effort to get through it. Gris makes use of colors, lighting, and architecture to direct the player, whilst simultaneously prompting you to think laterally without even realizing it, and I believe that in this aspect, it supersedes the likes of Journey and Inside. Kudos to you, Nomada. Also, I'd like to take a second to appreciate the fact that the controls for the abilities that you unlock along the way don't show up on the options menu until you unlock them. Oftentimes, games give away these abilities right at the very start, removing the element of surprise and wonder that comes with discovering you can do something new. It's lovely when a game like this shows me a new ability and makes me go, well, this changes everything. It's a shame that it's currently restricted to PC and Switch owners, because there's a ton more people it's not reaching. But it'll get there. This essentially covers everything I'm willing to say about the game without spoiling it. I'd like to dive into the themes and lesser known parts of this game for the next handful of minutes, and this segment is solely intended for those who've already finished the game. If you plan on watching the segment, having not played it, stop. I'm making this video with the intent of being concise enough to spoil as little as possible, while still being informative enough to intrigue those who have yet to play it. And I genuinely do not want to ruin the magic for anyone who hasn't. This is a game that will leave its mark, and you have the opportunity to experience it right now, knowing only that it's worth it. So if you haven't completed Gris, stop watching. Throughout my first playthrough, I had the impression that the game was about overcoming some sort of adversity. To paint a picture, The game initially transitions from vivid to monochrome within the first minute, representing an inability to cope with the initial onset of grief, which, judging by the statues and hidden ending, would be the death of the protagonist's mother. The connection they shared is now broken. The act of singing that once gave her joy is washed away under overwhelming anguish. When one's mental state is as such, they tend to see things rather one-dimensionally. They cling on to or focus on a singular emotion or aspect of their daily lives. Anger, irritation, an addiction, or obsession. Their spectrum is limited to no more than shades of grey. As they recuperate, they gradually start opening up, not just emotionally, but mentally too. They become more willing to ease up on their tunnel vision and start growing as a person again. The colors and abilities metaphorically represent these phases of growth, learning to stand your ground in the face of adversity or negativity, altering your movement to open up new ventures for yourself, and regaining your passion, your raison d'etre, so that you can move on and grow. Completing the game unlocks a chapter select screen listing 5 distinct chapters. My immediate thought was that this was almost certainly tied to the 5 stages of grief. Chapter 1 begins in a void the girl created to isolate herself from reality, a realm of ruins, remnants of what you used to be. If you go out of your way, right at the start, to a statue of the girl's mother, crumbling, decaying, the secret here requires you to relinquish control over the character to allow her a moment to grieve. Chapter 2 fills the world with hues and tones of red, a rocky wasteland where the wind never ceases. The phase of anger, of irrationally lashing out against your surroundings in an attempt to blame, begins. Anger can blind. For every step forward you take 2 steps back. Until, of course, that innate human stubbornness kicks in, allowing you to push back in spite of everything. At one point, you can enter yet another monochrome area, this time with a starker contrast between the shades. A cavern filled with pottery and more crumbling statues of her mother. The secret here requires you to destroy 3 statues. This is probably the girl seeking catharsis. This releases black butterflies, whose symbolism becomes more apparent in the following chapter. Chapter 3 adds a variety of greens to the world. Life has found its way back into the void. It represents the phase of bargaining, looking to those around you, hopeful that maybe, just maybe, they can make things right again, restore them to the way they were. As you fly higher and higher, aided by the red butterflies, you encounter the black ones again. This shape-shifting darkness, constantly trying to halt your journey, is a malleable threat. It represents the things that threaten to drag you back down to that abyss of sorrow and anger. They can take any form and come from anywhere. All you can do is flourish and grow in the face of it. This much is symbolized by its aversion to song and music. The secret in this chapter requires you to try singing to a particular statue. Obviously, you don't know about the ability to sing on your first playthrough, but the girl does. The bond between mother and daughter was one that was shared through singing. The mother's death cut that connection, and trying to sing to a statue of her hiding its face, while being emotionally unprepared to even do so, speaks far louder than any words could. Chapter 4 introduces the moodiest of colors to the world. Depression, the most well-known of the phases, sees its home in this chapter. The murky beneath, a slow mess to travel through, always trying to hinder you and bring you down. Even after gaining the ability to swim, you continue to head even further below, where the light no longer reaches. The secret here has you swim down to those depths, deeper and deeper down a narrowing tunnel that terminates in a statue of the mother falling in a region with the slightest bit of light. The whole segment comes back around as you make your way to another cracked statue of the mother, and at long last begins the final chapter. The girl tries to sing, but only a quick breath escapes her. The failure isn't important. Her attempt is. For it is only in trying that she can begin to wade out of the pit of depression and onto acceptance. And as it always does, depression finds a way. It returns more venomous and willing than ever. And just as it's about to get her, a reliable ally returns, a shoulder to lean on in the darkest of times. And finally, the transition is complete as the last stage truly begins. We're at last inside a crystal palace among the clouds. The girl recovers her final ability, and the scenery comes alive. The cold blues and blacks are now tinged with the warmest of reds. The environment is suddenly teeming with life. Everything takes on an even more fantastical appearance, where suddenly the world is so much more beautiful than it used to be. The secret in this chapter requires you to sing to a statue of the mother in eternal slumber, setting the flora around her to bloom, leaving what started off as another ruin beautiful. This falls in line with the changes in appearance observed across the statues throughout the game. What started off as aged, cracked, and crumbling gradually reforms over the chapters every time it reappears, culminating in the eyes being the last pieces to fall into place. Even as the pitch-black monster rears its head at your final step, the girl's tangled mess of emotions have now been sorted. Grief has been overcome. I couldn't help but find myself rooting for her, and you probably did too, because the visually represented sorrows and struggles she experiences manage to make themselves manifest as genuine emotions within you. These metaphors are universal, so beautifully illustrated that Gris is capable of speaking to anyone and everyone willing to stop what they're doing and listen. Gris isn't a game that's just played with your hands and mind, but with your heart. And crafting such an experience is one that requires boundless talent, creativity, a knack for rigorous introspection, and an understanding of how the human mind ticks. It's a game that handles the intricacies of emotion and loss with the utmost care and understanding. What some may turn away from for being a meager 3-hour title is an experience you'll carry with you for life. Gris will continue to be relevant for years to come, as a game that transcends the norms of its medium by leaps and bounds. It's a game that I'll continue to periodically come back to reminisce about and meditate over, which is why I've decided that it is absolutely, assuredly, undoubtedly worthy of a 6.5 out of 10. Get the fuck out of here!